Hello.
Hi.
All right, it is that time. Taylor Swift would make it horror. And this month it is Ashton, and she took inspiration from the song So Long London. Would you like to tell us the title slash synopsis slash any warnings about the story?
Yes, I would. So the story is called For Whom the Bell Tolls, and you might recognize that title either from Ernest Hemingway, from Metallica, from the Bee Gees, or from the original by poet John. I'm not going to pronounce his last name because I don't know. It's Donne, and that's just confusing to me. And he died a long time ago, so hey. Anyways, but he wrote a poem that emphasizes how important it was for every single life and that every single life is precious. And so I kind of took a few different influences for this story, and we will go into this, but essentially the story is a woman who is on her deathbed, so to speak, and she is recalling the circumstances that brought her to this point, including a mysterious stranger, a shipwreck, and a washing away of her sanity.
You sent this story to me last night, and I was like, I don't have time to read it tonight, but I'm going to read the first three paragraphs. And at the end of those first three paragraphs, I was like, well, I kind of want to keep reading now, but I'm also very tired. But so you did very good at grabbing people's attentions right away.
Well, thank you.
So I'm gonna go ahead and say it. We've already done some of this interview, but then it got lost because my computer was stupid. So I feel really silly repeating myself. Um,
It's okay. It's not the first time it's happened. Just there were other issues.
there were. So let's pretend like we haven't already asked these. So we recently just read Dracula, and right away I was like, does she own the Demeter here? Because this is giving some very Dracula slash The Last Voyage of the Demeter vibes. In particular, it was the rumors of dead rats, missing crew members, and of a stranger rumored to be dwelling near the crates were never meant for me to hear, but I heard them nonetheless. So, was this taken from the little, I think it was like a news kind of article or something in Dracula where we get insight on how Dracula came to be in London?
So yes and no. I have really been kind of thinking about the story and how I wanted it to go since the Tortured Poets Department was released earlier this year. And so I was always going to, like, there's a line in there about how you say that I abandoned the ship, but I was going down with it. And so I always wanted there to be a ship. And obviously, like, this is my first time reading Dracula, and but there are details about Dracula that I think most people know, which is the crates and the rats, and that Dracula is like actually hiding on there. And I've watched Bela Lugosi's Dracula, and I've watched Nosferatu. I think Nosferatu also kind of does the same thing. There's a lot of copying, and so I definitely did pull from that, although it was not necessary. It was just kind of like a fun little added detail.
Since there are little warnings of what is it,
Oh yeah, I did
sexual
not go into the
manipulation?
trigger warnings, did I? I
No,
did
I don't
not.
think you did. That's
Okay,
okay.
so
You've already done it, and you probably just in the last
yeah,
video, so it's brain fog.
yes. So as Kayla was alluding to, this the trigger warnings for this story, I do not go into detail. I do not even cover this topic, but it is very much an intentional allegory for rape in the story. So if you are sensitive to that and like extremely sensitive to that in any way whatsoever, I would not recommend this story for you. Also, I don't know if this was mentioned or not, but this story does contain, or this interview will contain spoilers. So if you want to listen to the story, I would recommend you clicking the link below in the description and also the little tagline that I should be adding on mine if you're watching this on my page, if I
Yeah.
remember, because I'm kind of
Yeah,
bad about
I'll do it
remembering
on
that.
mine.
Okay,
If
cool.
it's on my page, I'll do it on mine. The main character here, her dad was what was it? Was some sort of title in the Marines, was he?
Yeah, so he was a member of the Royal Navy, and now he's
Oh,
just a ship merchant.
Navy. I have everything's not here anymore. Um, so does she typically go on these voyages with her father, or like every single one? Because she seems fairly familiar with things.
I would like to think that she goes on them as often as he lets her. I think that he sees this as kind of a can be very dangerous profession, and he does not necessarily want to see her going along with this, but this was supposed to be a very safe voyage. There was no harm that was supposed to happen, and it was perfectly okay for her to be there. And then suddenly, there is all these strange things happening with the rats, with the crew members going missing, with there being a mysterious stranger on board, and this tempest that comes out of absolutely nowhere, and it ends up killing every single person on board except for her, even though she had asked for her life to end in exchange for her father, but that does not happen.
It doesn't. But there are some things that I really like when she's kind of holding on because storm ship, you don't want to go overboard here. There's this guy, and what was his name? Jerry. I'm trying to find my placement. Was that his name?
Yes.
So I found like some tie-ins with the song, like from the very beginning before we get to the shipwreck, the "As I Lie on the Altar," which I'm assuming from the "I Died on the Altar Waiting for the Clues," which also makes an appearance later on in a more direct quotey kind of, not a direct quote, but you see it a little more because of the clues. You use the word clues in there and everything. But here, when you're on the ship, I really like the description because I think a lot of times we say like frail or weak hands, which is fine. Like that, I don't think there's anything wrong with that description. But you really painted the picture when you said my knuckles were practically white from the ironclad grip that I held, unrelenting even when I could see Jerry's arthritic hands begin to falter, which is another callback to the song with the night, like the white knuckle grip, but also just the arthritic hands. It just really made me feel like this poor guy's about to like die. He's not gonna make it. He can't hold on.
Yeah, like the stakes were definitely real for every single person on board, and I wanted to make that very clear that it was either take this deal, which I guess we've not gone into. But anyways, take this deal with the mysterious stranger on board who is somehow able to talk directly to her, even though there is like the waves crashing against the ship and everything, and she's not gonna hold on. Like the entire ship is going down.
Yeah, and like she sees our Dracula like character, his name is London, which we haven't found that out yet, but and he says that he can save her, but she says like no, basically like no, save my father. And then there ends up being a shipwreck, and it's not a chronological kind of story. Um, the give everyone an idea. But when she finds this man, she can't save him. Turns out like, hello, it's the guy from the ship, and he says, "I believe you owe me." And here's kind of when we get into the stuff that the warning stuff that you like, very um sexual assaulty kind of vibes going on. And what made you go with that versus super sexy vampire? This is a good time.
So I have had a very long obsession with vampires, but for me, the I know that there is an argument that vampires are kind of like this idea of like sexual awakening, like sexual deviance. But to me, I've always seen like this terrifying creature. Like I was terrified of them long before Twilight came out, and just aging us a little bit. And like I remember there was a book fair where I got like a bundle of books and Dracula is one of them, and I was just like, no, I can't do this. Like the thought of just somebody coming to you like unsuspectingly, being able to drain you and kill you, and you not having any say about it, like the actual monster part of it, I have just kind of found very disturbing. And also, it's not a very popular theory, but there's also a theory that vampires were written as an allegory for rape. And this is a type of story that I have wanted to explore for a while. And even though, like, Taylor Swift is obviously not talking about this in So Long London, when I heard this song for the first time and, like, the bells and just kind of, like, how haunting it was and how she's, like, talking about how she like stopped CPR after all what's the use, and it's just like, and two graves, one gun, just like this is the perfect opportunity for me to finally explore this topic that I've loved for so long in the form of a story.
Yes, and it was very interesting. And because I know before we were talking about it, and because I think you and I kind of feel the same way when it comes to vampires. Like, I don't completely feel, I guess I should say, I guess I feel if I were like focusing completely on the monster part, like you were saying, like it is very scary, and I think that's why you and I kind of tend to lean in that
Yeah,
direction. But I
like
guess I
don't
can
get me
see
wrong,
like
sexy vampires fun too.
I guess I can see like especially the time period that if you go way back when like vampires weren't like they were kind of like I guess a newer thing, I guess you would say. Like I guess it does make sense because religion played a huge part in people's lives, and that was kind of maybe like the thing of because you were talking about how our friend said that she doesn't see it as this like the way you and I tend to form stories about it. She's like, yeah, because you're like inviting the deviants into your home. So I think it's interesting that there are so many people who like, and I didn't realize that the theory you were talking about was very unpopular. I thought it was probably a very popular opinion. So, whoops. Um, but I guess I can also see how, especially with going back a long time ago and religion kind of being the forefront of everything, how this could be like, hey, this is a consequence of sin, kind of in a
Yeah.
way, or like um, sexual exploration. So have you always like just always looked at vampires? Like I know you said you looked at them as scary, but in this kind of way, I guess that particular topic.
Uh,
Um,
well, no, because I heard about vampires long before I understood anything about sex
well,
or
yeah, that's
anything
why
like
I'm
that.
saying like as you got older,
Yes.
because I wasn't thinking about that when I was young either. So
Yeah. Yeah. And because, like, if I'm remembering correctly, like, it was kind of strange to me when Twilight came out because it was just like, okay, like, I have this thought of what a vampire is. I wasn't allowed to, like, watch Buffy or anything. So that was my first introduction to vampires apart from just hearing, like, the lore behind it. And so it's just like, oh, like everybody's like wanting her to date the vampire, but like the vampire's scary. So, and then I like read it. I'm just like, oh, okay, like I would also like to date the vampire now, so it's fine.
yeah, I guess depending on how you're looking at it, if you're taking it, I guess, from the context of when the a vampire was created in literature, then it is very much so a sexual awakening type of thing versus the other thing I don't want to repeat too much on YouTube.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that's fair.
so I know that this London, he ends up taking what's her name, Maeve.
Maeve. Yeah.
Maeve, yes. But he ends up taking her, and how long was she with him? Because you say it at one part where he started draining her so much to the point where it's like her ribs, you could like just she was like bone basically, and then her
Mm-hmm.
hair had started falling out until it was all gone, and that her teeth were kind of following suit. How long was she with London during this time?
Yeah. So, ignoring science, because I'm just having to take a guess at it, basically, what is happening in the story is instead of him completely killing her, and instead of her turning into a vampire because he did not finish the job, what ends up happening instead is that she is a continuous food source for him, which is not anything that I've really seen. I was very happy when they kind of did that in Deadpool, like a slight nod, because I hadn't seen that in like anything at all. And I wanted to kind of emphasize like what would be happening to her body as she is strained to almost the point of death over and over again. And I would assume that the human body could not withstand that for longer than a few months, if even a few months. So that's about where she's at. Like she's, even though he's trying to keep her alive, London lives with her. They form a relationship of sorts. He feeds her like human food and tries to keep her rested and wakes her up basically just to feed and then sends her back to bed with food. Yeah. So it's only been a few months, but in her head, she has like absolutely no concept of time. Like, she's not sure if she is 20 years old or if she is 36 because her entire life is just like this miserable cycle of being used and cast
That's
aside
unfortunate.
until he comes back.
Yeah, and you calling him London, I kind of were you wanting to do the double meaning of so long London, or did you just not want it to be set in London, so you named him London?
Yeah. So I was trying to figure out like a good name for him. I was just like, well, I don't necessarily want to claim that this is set in London because at some point somebody's going to be like, but London's actually not set up like this. And it's just like, I don't care. So I was just like, the guy's going to be named London. If you want to picture this in London, you can picture it in London, but this is unnamed coastal area. So,
Okay.
I mean, like, it's definitely British because the characters are British. I make sure that they eat British food. Like kidney pie sounds absolutely disgusting to me, but if you guys eat that, that's fine. And Maeve is also a British name. I would assume that London's probably not. I don't know. Maybe it is. The only London I've ever met is my friend's kid, who is like 6 years old.
Because I noticed the food, and I was wondering. That's why I was wondering because you did have a lot of, or like a few references to food in here that seemed not of like something you'd find in Alabama, I guess, or like that you would like think common, a common dish in Alabama, I should say.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I look. Alabama people eat weird food though, so
oh my goodness. So, I noticed that there were a lot of references, and I wrote down so many of them, but I don't want to get into all of them right now because they're just I did catch a lot of them, and I feel like if you don't know the song, you're not gonna know that they're references. So, uh, I guess that's good.
yeah.
um, but because I saw what was it like forgetting God and my good name, and did you pull that from But Daddy I Love Him? My good name. It's my name of disgrace, or did you not?
Actually, I probably did subconsciously. I'm not going to give myself full credit for that one, but for so many of these stories, I kind of like to add like little sprinkles of lyrics from other songs in here too. So, yes.
Okay, yeah. um, well, Whoops to that one, I guess. But there were a lot in here.
There were some references. So the story, it kind of goes in two different directions. One is a present tense, starting with her dying and kind of working its way backwards to when she first meets London. And the other part is when she first meets London and the events that lead to her death. And they kind of like coincide in the middle. And so the story kind of unfolds where she pleads for London, who seems to be this like supernatural force to save her father. She ends up waking up on the beach. She's not really sure like what just happened, but her clothes are like absolutely soaked, and she's pretty sure that she really did experience what was happening, and she's freaking out trying to figure out where her father is. And she sees this man up on a rock, and she doesn't know if it's her father. It's too far out. She has to go to like rescue him. There's like a little scene where she rescues him. It's kind of like creepy because he's just like literally like staring at her like with his like ravenous like hunger, and he just does not look natural in the water. And she pulls him out, and this is apart from the white knuckle dying breath and the altar. This is where I threw in another reference because she's initially trying to start CPR, and she's
Oh,
realizing
there
that
we
there's
go.
absolutely no use because his spirit was gone. I did, and that's kind of like also one of those, another one of those hints that he's a vampire, because like my boyfriend didn't get it right away that he was a vampire. Like it took a little while before I like explicitly said it. He's like, I think this is a vampire, but I'm not sure if this is a vampire yet.
Oh,
And yeah, and so like that was kind of one of those signs. It's just like, well, she's convinced that he's dead, and like all of a sudden he's behind her, like, you owe me. And she's like, what? Like
she's like,
I
what?
literally just did CPR. Like there was no breath like left in you. Like what do you mean?
Yeah, and I actually did have a question about this scene, and it was just because, like, did you talk to our mutual friend before or after you wrote this story? Where you had
Before,
the
but I already,
conversation?
yeah, but I already like knew every single key plot point in this
Okay.
before I had
So,
that
yeah, I was
conversation.
gonna, I didn't know if the conversation that you had kind of like played into the whole, because I know you guys were, she looks at things very differently of the, oh, you're inviting it because you invite them in, you're inviting the deviants into your life. And I didn't know if instead of just leaving him and trying to save him at first, even though she did ultimately leave him, if that was part of that or if that was just part of the story before that was ever
Yeah,
in your head.
no, that was part of it because like in the story, the way that it reads is basically you assume that London is going to sexually take advantage of her, and that is the favor. And he is essentially saying things to her. I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but things that men have said to try to coerce and pretend as if that is owed. And that's kind of where the allegory really hits hard, is the reader is expecting that to happen, and all of a sudden she feels like the pinpoints in her neck.
There, I didn't know if you had that conversation before or after, or and if you were just like incorporating the two, or if but so you have Elizabeth come in,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, you say she's like looks about 18, which means she's probably 15, 16, trying to look older to kind of get attention from the older, wealthier men. Was she supposed to come in and completely replace Maeve, or was she supposed to kind of just be another one, kind of like Dracula's wives are in there? Was he trying to like collect, for lack of a better word right now, these women to feed off of, or was he planning to replace her?
Yeah. So I think at the moment where Elizabeth is around, he's not certain. He knows that the experiment is failing with Maeve, where she is very obviously dying. She is no longer beautiful. He doesn't really necessarily care about that, but in human terms, she does not seem as if she's going to be able to survive this constant abuse. So he's kind of like letting off on her, like not consuming as much, trying to kind of figure out if this is the route that he wants to continue to go, is just taking advantage of more and more young women, or if he just wants to kind of have both. But of course, there's never really an opportunity for him to explore that because Maeve decides to put an end to it.
Yeah, and what I find really, I mean, it would have been really sad either way, but was her father kind of seemed to want to, because you mentioned how she was scared because she's heard of like prostitutes having to, do certain things in order to survive. And she was talking, like, she was thinking about how her father said she would never have to live that kind of life so long as he was around, basically. And then as soon as he's gone, she's thrust into it.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not exactly in the way that they were talking about, but so that was sad. And I know that in Dracula, like, Dracula made Jonathan write notes and everything so everyone would think he was fine, and he didn't have access to actually, like, like a telephone. He didn't have, because I don't even know when was the telephone invented. I don't even know. But the point is, he didn't have access to anybody.
Right.
Like, he couldn't send letters on his own. He had to write very specific letters, and so Dracula could kind of see through them. And here, I kind of thought you were going to go that route with like them being on the Demeter and everything, and her living with him. Uh, but she had access to a phone.
She did.
At what point between the ending and the beginning, like how much of a time gap was there? Because it ends with Dracula, not Dracula, sorry, I'm going back and forth because I'm pulling parallels from Dracula to here. But how long was, because London, he'd already went and he killed Elizabeth. And of course, he pulled the whole "look what you made me do" kind of thing, like, haha, look what you made me do. But, and then it kind of ended with her just being like apologizing and like, oh, I was just so jealous. And then we know that that's not where it ends, because we know we know where she ends up from the beginning. But exactly, do you have an idea of how much time has passed between him killing Elizabeth, blaming Maeve, and then her ending up at the altar?
Yeah, so basically no time at all. So in my head, that scene kind of worked out, where he sees her running after Elizabeth, and that is her one opportunity to grab the phone, which I might need to rework this now based on what you've said. But anyway, she grabs the phone. She happens to have a number to the church that her father used, or at least a common line, to kind of get the priest on the phone. And she kind of like communicates with him that she's scared, that she needs him to come. They kind of have this conversation about what has been happening, and he comes to the house pretty much a little bit after. So London comes back. Maeve is backpedaling, trying to like lie to him and like to appease him, like saying like I was jealous, like basically like trying to make him believe her. So he finds her in front of, or he finds her like in the house, and kind of like gathers her and takes her to the church. Like, he's not convinced that he wants to kill her or anything, but he wants to at least get her away from the house, and like puts like a rosary around her for like protection, and is like, okay, we're gonna just figure this out because you're asking me to crazy like kill you over something like absolutely crazy.
I'm assuming, because you said you don't have an exact year, but this was obviously like not as far back as some of the inspiration, even if it wasn't, because like you said, you had the story in your head before you read Dracula. You just took small parts like the Demeter and stuff, right? So obviously this wasn't as far back as Dracula, since she has access to a phone.
Yeah, so the phone was invented in 1876.
In 1876? When
Yes.
was Dracula written? Because they didn't have
Uh,
phones, and weren't they relatively wealthy?
yeah, I mean, it could have been like, it was written, I think, at the end of the 18th century.
Yeah, so wouldn't they have? I don't know why no one had a phone, unless they did and I forgot.
I don't know, maybe it wasn't, and maybe it was like written back further than contemporary times, or maybe it just
Maybe.
wasn't. I mean, like, I would assume that only the rich had the phone, though.
That's true.
But
I know,
Dracula
like,
would also be rich. I don't know.
yeah, that's why. Anyway, um, but London's not dead at the end of the story, correct? Because
Correct.
she wants them to kill her so that both she and London end up dying. And in your brain, do you have any idea of what happens to her, or have you even left it like, I don't want to know, so I'm just gonna leave it like this, even for yourself?
Oh no, no. She dies. She it's kind of a Stockholm syndrome type of situation where she, even though at first she is absolutely non-consenting to anything that he is doing, she kind of tricks herself into thinking that this is what she wants in order to deal with the stress and just how sad the situation is, and she really can't even process it. Like, she doesn't have enough mental faculty to start questioning it, and when she starts to kind of come around, that's when she realizes, like, there's a scene where she is watching Elizabeth and like the same thing happening to her, and she's like turning this back around, and she's like, i I didn't want this either.
Yeah.
And for her, this was always like such a prolonged mental battle. And for him, she was literally just a food source. He's not going to risk coming to save her because he never loved her. Like, it's just like this whole
Yeah.
complex thing of a woman and this monster that's just doesn't care.
Yeah, and I know you said that she was saying like near the end, like, oh, I was jealous to appease him, but wasn't it seems like there was some as you said, like she did kind of trick herself. So it seemed like there was some jealousy and then she pulled herself out of it and then was like, oh no, but like maybe the feeling that she was describing wasn't necessarily false completely.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't think that if she wouldn't have had that connection with her father and remembering those stories and just had such a good influence in her life, if she would have been so quick to pick up that phone, or if she would have been kind of like sitting with that for a lot longer.
gotcha. So sad story for pretty much everybody.
Yeah, I
Except
mean,
for
I really took that whole like, how much sad did you think I had? Did you think I had in
yeah,
me? How much tragedy?
it's
Like,
like
very seriously. It's just like, let's just give her like a really, really sad story.
it's like how much? Well, let's find out.
Right.
I don't know why, but when I was thinking of her at the like, do you ever like have a description told to you because it's not in a linear kind of order, and then you're like, now I gotta go back and repicture all the scenes. Like that's how I was with here because I did not picture her at the very beginning like being emaciated, bald,
Yeah.
teeth probably possibly like so that paints a bit of a when you get there you're like, oh, I mean that was already kind of horrifying because
Yeah.
nobody wants to be tied to a slab. Um, well, I mean, I
Right.
guess maybe she did, but she had her reasons. But
Yes.
the kind of when you go back after reading it the first time, you're like, oh, oh, yikes! Like, I mean, it was already not a great situation, but yikes.
Mm-mm. Yeah. I'm very glad that it had that effect that it did, because like, when you read these stories, I mean, like, traditionally when we read a story, we picture the person as being, like, the people inside the story as being beautiful, because it makes them more sympathetic in a way. So like, for this, I
Yeah,
kind of wanted to
unfortunately.
build that sympathy, make you think that this was like a beautiful person like all the way through, and like, this kind of like tragic affair, like seeing such a beautiful person like being torn out, and then you realize that she was all of that, and she has just literally been every single perception that you think that you have of her. It kind of makes you realize, like, oh shit, like she is actually, like, this is real. Like, it's not just a like story about like a beautiful person like succumbing. This is a story of a person, we don't know whether she was beautiful or not, but completely and totally succumbed to the fact, to the point where she no longer even like really resembles somebody that you would have sympathy for.
Yeah, and it's kind of unfortunate that beauty does tend to make people sympathize more, which is kind of sad because you wouldn't think that being like traditionally beautiful or maybe not like would make you more worthy of sympathy, but I feel like for readers that kind of is a thing. Like people want to see pretty people. That's why Hollywood's so full of beautiful people, right?
Right.
And so I kind of appreciate when people kind of deviate from that. So now that you have written a vampire story, do you think that you'll try to, and it's not like the first one you've written either, but it's the first one with like this like non-linear kind of timeline of like this kind of theme to it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Do you think that you will go back and try to tackle the topic again through other stories, or do you think you, because I know you said you wanted to write something like this for the longest time, or do you think, hey, I got it out of my system now I'm good?
Yeah, I think that this was my getting it out of my system story, because like it doesn't need to be a long format story. I think that this was a short story was the best format to kind of tackle that, because I mean, like, we're both horror writers, we write in other genres too, but there are some topics that, even though they are good horror stories, that I don't necessarily want to glorify. And I think that you are probably the same way, where it's just like there's some topics where you don't really want to go into detail because you don't want to give power to that real life horror in a way that somebody can grasp onto for a full story. Because I don't want to go into the themes in the story for an extended period of time.
I think depending on how it's done, I think it's always depending on how it's done that stories with this theme could have be a very good like full-fledged like novel, but it just depends on if you're willing to do that and if it's done well, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is there any story, now you don't have to specify which one if you don't want to, but have you written, and this because we're nearly halfway there, the halfway
I
mark,
know.
nearly. I don't know that we're quite there, but so far have there been any that you have considered turning into an actual novel?
You know, while I was writing this one, I was just like, I am having so much fun with this story that I would love to turn it into a novel. And, but I think that I said what I wanted to say in the short amount of time. Maybe New Year's Day. I think New Year's Day could be expanded significantly more.
Gotcha.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I think that I
Yeah.
think about it like during like the time that I'm like writing it, and I'm just like, what the hell is lurking assumptions? I don't remember that story. And then like there's like a couple of interviews, or like a few interviews back, I was just like, yeah, like I'm also gonna do a vampire story. I was just like, wait, I've already done two.
You're like, yeah, I want to do this. And it's just like, oh,
Yeah, I don't know. I just keep going back to vampires, but like I think I've had a different approach to vampires like the three times that I've done them, so I'm fine with it. I'm just like, but at least it's not like a rehashing where it's like, this is Ever Cullen 2.0, the blonde one, and this is version 3, but he's kind of like Rupert Grint.
like Rupert Grint. Like,
Can you imagine a horror story with
I love
Rupert
my
Grint
Rupert Grint.
vampire?
You know what? I'd watch it if Rupert Grint was playing a
I would too.
vampire. I'm not gonna lie, I'd watch it. I'd watch anything with him in it. I love him.
He's so cute.
But he would. He is. It would be really funny to see him playing a vampire, though. I don't know
And for
why.
him
I
to be
think because
scary.
he just looks like such a nice guy that like it
Yeah.
would be funny. But I guess he did recently play someone who wasn't the nicest. in the past
Yeah.
couple years. But
Cue
anyway, off
the
topic.
redheads don't have souls, so he'd be a perfect vampire jokes.
See, there we go.
And then you said that you had like a lot of notes on references. So I just wanted to say the very end of the story. I guess I said that I kind of like really fed into the chorus on this, but the end is just like her basically like her going on about like, yeah, where's the proof? And
Mm-hmm.
you said that you love me, but where's the proof? And it's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna end it
Mm-hmm.
with her asking these questions that are very damning and so long-winded.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to go into all like the one that I pulled up, like out of all of them that I had, the one that I pulled up, you're like, oh, no, that wasn't intentional. I was like, oh,
Oh,
whoops. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Don't forget to do the whole like subscribe thing if you liked this, whatever. Also, Ashton's channel in the description below, video in the description below, anything else that I'm forgetting in the description below. And we will see you in December for a Christmas tree farm inspired horror story.
playlists for both the interviews and for the stories are below. All of these stories are in one place, so whichever story, whichever song you like and you want to hear butchered first, click on it. I don't know. This is awkward. If you made it here, I appreciate you. You know how awkward we are. Goodbye.